Good evening. My name is Carmen Valdivia. I am the museum's director, and I would like to welcome you to the Cuban Museum and invite you to visit the Operation Pedro Pan exhibit on the first floor galleries, as well as the Brigade 2506 on the second floor gallery. Both exhibits are scheduled to be on display until March of next year. I'd like to start by recognizing a representative from Daniela Levin Cabo, our Miami-Dade County Mayor. Where are you? Tomás Alcala. Tomás Alcala, where are you? Okay. And I would also like to recognize the Miami Springs Mayor, Maria Mitchell, and her husband that are sitting right here in the front. Okay. Today we're presenting The Lost Boys, a memoir of Operation Pedro Pan. Its author was born in Cuba in 1950 and came to the United States in 1962 through Operation Pedro Pan. Upon arrival, he was taken to the Florida City camp, and he was later relocated several times before his parents' eventual arrival in 1967. For the past 25 years, he has been researching Operation Pedro Pan for his book. I witnessed him going to our monthly Pedro Pan reunions armed with a little notebook and a pencil in his shirt pocket at the ready for note-taking. The much anticipated book was finally published last year. Everything that you want to know about Operation Pedro Pan is in the book. He does not leave anything out. He tells the good, the bad, and the ugly. Dicen que recordar es volver a vivir. They say that to remember is to live again. And his vivid recollection of some of his experiences brought back to life so many long-forgotten memories of my days at the Florida City camp. One passage in particular in that book not only brought back memories, but solved a 6-decade-old mystery. His narration of one of our Friday movie nights reads as follows. Tarantula was billed as a science fiction most terrifying thrill. It showed at our camp had more realism than if it had been shown in 3D. Gaby, Juanito, and San Jorge had planned for the prank. They gathered live crabs during their last fishing outing. With the crustaceans hidden inside a laundry bag, they sat in the back seats. They threw the 8-legged creatures at the most tense moment of the movie. The crabs landed on the girls' hair and clothes, and mass hysteria erupted. Girls were jumping out of their seats and brushing them off in wild convulsions. The hard-shell monsters clicked loudly against the floor as in surround sound. It caused a trampling panic out the door and down the stairs. I don't think that any of us girls present that day, and there were many of us sitting in the cold recreation room floor, can ever forget that experience. I assure you that the noise of the little crab legs on the terrazzo floor is motion picture worthy. What we did not know at the time, but should have suspected, was that our beloved Gaby was the culprit. About our shared Pedro Pan times, our author writes, the camp experience truly defined us as a group. In these places, our wit was greater and our sense of self magnified. We didn't have much in the way of amenities, but we had each other. And then he says, all the boys and girls I lived with will forever be my brothers and sisters. So you see, in the end, these boys were not really lost because Cuba's loss was our gain. And our Pedro Pan bond makes us a unique band of brothers and sisters. So it is with extreme pleasure that I introduce my Pedro Pan brother, Dr. Javier Llorens.
Thank you. This is epic. Thank you all for being here. I feel honored and I feel blessed. I also feel humbled, but to be real also, I feel very, very proud. Because who would have said that the quiet, shy, skinny boy in the camp that el guajirito de Baracoa would grow up to be the written voice of so many. So thank you again for being here. Thank you, Carmen, for this opportunity and also the use of this amazing venue. I see no other place where our unique Pedro Pan experience is shared better than right here in the American Museum of the Cuban Diaspora. First, let me get my notes in case I lose my place. Okay, so how this is going to work is that I'm going to give the presentation, and it will take about 25, 30 minutes, and then I'll engage the panel. My brother's here. Okay, and then I'll sit with them, and then we'll open up for questions from the audience, okay? So first, let me start by giving a little preamble of what a memoir is. A memoir is a first-person narrative. It's a literary work of nonfiction about the life experiences of an individual or a group at a specific time and place in world history. A few weeks after I got published, I received an email from one of our classmates at Belen. He was the brainiac of the class, and it was a glowing review. Okay, I was blown away by it. And he said that he had felt a great void in the Cuban-American history of that time period, and voila, my book was there to fill it. He also said that my book qualified as a true memoir. And I wonder, what's the difference between a memoir and a true memoir? He said, it's because a true memoir takes into consideration the geopolitical, sociocultural, and religious influences of the time. He said, then he went in one of his intellectual diatribes, he said, these forces are like thrown pebbles into a pond of water. They create concentric circles. And these circles interact with each other and form the fabric of our lives. And in a deeper philosophical sense, the existential matrix of our human experience. I was, blown away by it. But I said, thank you so much. And I'm glad I made that decision. But there were many decisions that I feel were made outside of myself. There was always a spiritual guidance that I felt, in all my research and writing, and something that I feel are beyond my intelligence, but I felt it like a calling, like a call to a ministry, and that's how I'm glad I listened to it. I also would like to, after I finish this part here, then I'll engage with the main part of the book. But also, I'd like to thank some of the Pedro Pan heroes for us that are here today, like Father Alberto Garcia and Dr. Mariano Loret de Mola and his wife, Marta. Thank you. Thank you so much. You really meant a lot to us in those particular days, okay? Thanks. Now, okay, so the bottom line was that it was a story that needed to be told, and now it has, okay? So the book, again, like Carmen said, is the name is The Lost Boys, a memoir of Operation Pedro Pan. It is written as a first-person narrative, but also with, it's called an omniscient point of view. That means that it's my experiences as a child and later revisited by me as an adult with an adult understanding and years of much research that adds layers upon layers to the Pedro Pan story. So let me just take a sip of water because I get it very dry. Thanks. So this is my story, and this is your story. It reminds me of a song by Neil Diamond, and don't be alarmed, I'm not going to sing. I only sing at my daughter's weddings, and they are both already married. Okay. So this, the lyrics, part of the lyrics to the song goes, well, except for the names and a few other changes, if you talk about me, the story's the same one. Well, how appropriate, huh? So this is the story of us, of the more than 14,000 Cuban boys and girls that made that amazing and unforgettable journey to freedom alone. It has been called Operation Pedro Pan, as you well know, and it is the largest legal exodus of children in the Western Hemisphere. The time was the early 1960s. The place was Cuba and the United States, particularly the Miami area where the refugee camps were in the state of Florida. And so at that time, it was a very tumultuous time in world affairs. It was at the height of the Cold War with the world superpowers, as you know, Russia and the United States going at each other, with Cuba in the middle. In our beautiful island, 2 years prior to that, the Castro Revolution had triumphed. I'm just going to go through a little history, okay? So everybody that's not a Pedro Pan could get a sense of things, and then I'll do a few readings from the book appropriate to where I'm at. So, so in that Castro Revolution, he ended up betraying all the promises of democracy that he had made, because the Cuban Revolution was a popular one. Everybody wanted to go back to democracy, and but it was all a lie. And then he went on to institute very, very bloody and very, very repressive communist regime in the island. You probably all know the particulars, all the statistics. At that time, the population of Cuba was just a little over 6 million inhabitants. And at that time, they went on to execute in El Paredón, okay, firing squads, about 4,000 Cubans within a 3-year span only. Now, those were not only men, they were also women, and they were also children, adolescents just like us. There's a newspaper article, I tell about it when I give the tour downstairs in our great exhibit. And I say that in that particular article from the New York Times, the author says that on that particular day, they had executed 5 kids, 5 teenagers in the island, 4 in the prison of La Cabaña in Havana, on the other side of the Havana harbor, and 1 in Pinar del Rio. So there were also at that time about 60,000 political prisoners. Now, those are staggering numbers when you consider only 6 million inhabitants in the island. Huh? So after the Bay of Pigs invasion, well, let me just the night before, prior to the Bay of Pigs invasion, they ended up rounding up also hundreds of thousands of parents that were in opposition to Castro and that regime. So many were our parents. In the case of my particular case, no, but many other parents were rounded up and taken into jail also. So I tell when giving the exhibits, the tours, I say that Cuba at that time was like a sinking ship, you know, and everybody, of course, has seen the movie The Titanic, you know. And what do you do in such a crisis, huh? Well, you put the children and the women first in the lifeboats. And that's what happened. So conscientious parents at that time then said, all is lost. We need to put our kids, our children, to save them, put them out of harm's way, and also safeguard them from the communist indoctrination. The Cuban children, as you know, then flew in commercial air flights to Miami, and then about half of them were received by family members, relatives, or friends, and they took care of them. The other half of them, like us, we didn't have anyone. So there were 3 fully licensed and approved organizations that took care of the kids, okay, according to their religion. And since about 92% of us were Catholic, most of us ended up, about 7,000 of us ended up in the Catholic welfare camps that were championed by, at that time, Father Brian O. Walsh. And he had also founded the Unaccompanied Cuban Children's Program about a month or so before this whole exodus started. So we ended up going to the refugee camps. In these refugee camps, there were 3 big ones here in the vicinity of Miami, and 2 group homes. But the group homes were mainly private foster care group homes. But it was in the big refugee camps where most of us lived. And we were, since they only had capacity for about 1,300 overall within all the camps, there was a need, a pressing need to relocate us out of throughout the United States. Okay, so I will do my first reading on that first day, on that first night. Okay, when we arrived in the refugee camp. So this is my experience here. Okay, let me set this up. Okay, since I arrived, I was 11 years of age. I arrived with my older brother, Julke, who was 16. They had one of they had made emphasis that to my brother, don't let anything split you up. And guess what happens? As soon as we landed at the airport, they split us up, okay? Because we had different ages, and then they took them in for questioning at INS camp. That's an Immigration and Naturalization Services camp in Opalaca. And then I ended up being with the other kids that went to in my case, to Camp Florida City, where they had all the preteens and girls of all ages. So when I arrived, I had 2 kids were with me, 2 boys. They were cousins, and all the girls were taken out by foster parents. They were already assigning them to different ones. Once we arrived in Florida City, of course, everything was dark at that night. Everyone was asleep. So I was the last one to be out of the convent of the nuns that night, and I felt like so down, because I said, gosh, even my relationship that I just established they just vanished. So I went to that room, and then I'll read from that experience. They gave me a toothbrush and a toothpaste, and told me go to the bathroom to pee and brush your teeth and then come back. So when I returned, they had readied one of 2 sofa beds that crowded the small living room floor. You can undress to your underwear and sleep here tonight, he said. Tomorrow, we'll make room with you with the others. Good night. Being alone suddenly took on added weight and substance, but also a sense that none of it was real. On the day when all my worldly bonds were severed, the night came with an exclamation point. Fear was fluttering in my stomach and wouldn't let go. It was a prehensile, nauseating feeling that chilled me from head to toe. I took the cover sheet with both hands and held it snug against my chin. It had been a long, emotional day. I felt bone-weary and scared, very scared. My unconsciousness picked up on the grave tone, and I began to mumble a bedtime prayer. It was El Ángel de la Guarda, the guardian angel, that my mom had taught me when I was little and afraid of El Cuco, the boogeyman. 4 pilares tiene mi cama. 4 angelitos que me lo guardan. Juan, Lucas, Marcos y Mateo. Duérmete, Javierito, y no tengas miedo. Sorry, I always lose it. Evoking, thank you so much. Era de Bravo, Rolando. Yo digo, Ismael. Evoking those 4 saints didn't seem to work this night. A thought darted through my head, and then another. In no time flat, my mind was cluttered, filled with mournful thoughts that recklessly bumped from one to another. There were also images, a torrent of them that wouldn't stop. My very life seemed to be passing in front of me with the speed of a strobe light gone berserk. All of a sudden, my mom's blurred image came to the forefront, like a pixelated image coalescing to complete form. I could see her clearly now, just as I had last seen her, hysterically crying behind the edge of the door to our room at the Hotel Alamac. That's when I had taken one last wistful glance back at her and waved an innocent adios. She was extremely distraught that morning and not allowed to go to the airport, as there was a strict rule that limited only one parent to accompany the kids traveling alone. I could still sense her gaze on my back, gently tapping me on the shoulder, responding in turn, and murmuring like a prayer, Ve con Dios, mi niño. Go with God, my son. I didn't cry then, for I was to be with my brother. I didn't cry then, for we were to live with our uncle, that he didn't show up at the airport because he was already in Chicago looking for work. Okay. I had illusions of studying abroad, of having adventures with my older brother, and soon return to a Cuba without Castro. No, I didn't cry then. That was many hours ago. I knew better now. Knowing better is usually an affirmation of empowerment, but not tonight. I was powerless. All of a sudden, the walls closed in, and I felt a ripping sensation deep inside of me. The umbilical cord to my past was severed, not neat and fast, as with a pair of sharp surgical scissors. Instead, it was ripped out, leaving a great empty hole in the pit of my stomach. That emptiness bled in inconsolable tears until all my energy was sapped. I couldn't conjure more images. My body was weighed down, all curled up in a fetal position. My mind was suspended and hovering over me, expanding like the viscous oil inside a lava lamp with globs that stretch out and lose shape. Everything became an amorphous whirl that sucked me to a void in the night. Now, after the I was telling you that all the kids were being relocated outside of the area of Miami. And of course, many of the parents soon followed the kids here. However, something happened. It was the Cuban Missile Crisis. And in the Cuban Missile Crisis, the world has never been at the brink of Holocaust, of nuclear Holocaust as on that time period. And then also another thing happened, that all the Havana-Miami flights were canceled indefinitely. So so there were no more kids coming in, okay, every day. And we were able to establish longer friendships. But since there were no more parents also coming over here, we thought that we might never see our parents ever again, and or return. And the hopes of returning to a free Cuba was very, very dim. So let me do a second reading of how we felt during that time period. Sheared off, we no longer thought that things were going to be all right. We got back to the daily drone, adrift a sea of insecurity, religion, the camps, and all our new friends in them were the only anchor. President Kennedy called us the most defenseless and troubled group among the refugee population. Countless times in solitary grieving that hit us in spells, we leaned against the refugee camp's chain-link fence and looked out into fate itself. How odd to be free when you feel trapped and have to escape in the mind. Back home, we were not free, yet we could roam all over on our bicycles. Our growing up, for sure, was an unconventional one. During those grieving times, total silence seemed to reign, making your internal cry that much louder. Letting out a deep, faithful sight, anger suddenly overtook you. With clenched fingers, you rattled the fence webbing hard and kicked up dirt and yelled out inside, "It's not fair, it's not fair. Why me, why me?" After standing there a while with brooding thoughts, life slowly came back into focus. We then looked around more calmly and had to amend that self-centered question to include the rest of us. Why us? Why us? No one dared entertain the big taboo question, are we going back? The hopeful interrogative was limited to, when are we going back? We all had heard older kids with prophetic voices comment in our jargon, "Esto va para largo." It's going to be a long stretch. The wait continued, and the tacit rumor settled into a dismal truth. Coño, esto va para largo. Shit, it's going to be a long, long stretch. So, since there were no more kids coming in the flights, there wasn't that much pressure to relocate us out of this area of Miami. So we started to feel like all of us were brothers and sisters, and we grew up together. And in case you guys haven't figured it out yet, we are the four boys in the cover photograph of the book. So, adolescence by itself is difficult. Well, I'm here to tell you that it's immensely more so when you're alone, in a strange country with a different culture and even a different language. Those refugee camps where the storyline of the book takes place were I think the core ethos of our Pedro Pan experience. I do a little reading now on that experience, what I felt about that. It's the first paragraph in the chapter called Group Identity. There's comfort in having things in common with others and getting outside of yourself. In the camps, it didn't get more common than the hobnobbing closeness of sharing a roof over our heads, meals on the table, and days on end of growing up together. So far, we had logged in 3 years in the refugee camps, 1 in Florida City and 2 in Campo Palaca. We felt like we've already carved a niche for ourselves in this fraternal, fenced-in society. The anxiety of living in this new country had subsided, but the longing to go back home dragged on indefinitely. In the camp's experience truly defined us as a group. In these places, our wit was greater and our sense of self magnified. This was something lost in the individual foster homes. We didn't have much in the way of amenities, but we had each other, those who understood without saying a word because the internal dialogue sounded the same. And you may ask, what was that internal dialogue saying? Well, I'm here to tell you that it wasn't just saying, it was screaming out, God, how I miss my parents. How I miss my home, my hometown, my friends, the rest of my family, and mi cubita bella, and my life the way it used to be. But this is not a boo-hoo-hoo story, okay? So even though we also had that deep sadness, we also had a lot of happiness, okay? Because from sun up to sundown, we will be playing with each other, and we'll be going to excursions outside the camps, having fun. We'll be going to downtown Miami on the weekends, going to the movies by ourselves. Huh? And even going to school was fun. Going to outside schools, learning English, and assimilating the American culture. I have a reading now of that, how much fun we had in those schools too, okay? So here we go. These 2 characters are going to be main characters here, okay? In the months that followed, our understanding of spoken English was improving, yet quite deficient. For most of the ordinary situations, we still had to rely on persons who understood English better than we did. Bugallo and Gabi were 2 such guys. When emotions were heated and understanding at a minimum, we depended on these rascals to translate properly. Even though good sense told us they were not to be trusted. 1 or 2 guys in every class are always more gullible than the rest. El Pirulí was one of them. Pirulí in Cuba was the name for a slender and conical soccer candy molded over a toothpick. I guess that nickname applied doubly for him in the sense that he was both skinny and a sucker. We called him Pirulo for short. Walker was behind him and had been pestering him all day. Pirulo finally exploded, turning around and shouting cuss words. Walker, like a fox, he hasn't changed, huh? Portrayed himself as the victim of the onslaught. Mr. Merce called out in commanding tone, "Fajardo, stop that. Now go and stand at attention in the back." Flustered, Pirulo looked around for translation. Gabby, with quick wit, saw an opportunity for entertainment. "He's telling you to get out of the class." "Okay, but tell him that it was Walker who started it." Bugallo grasped the game and joined in the volleys of fun. "Mr. Merce, he says it wasn't his fault, so he's going to get out of the class." With increased emphasis, the perturbed teacher tried to redirect Pirulo through his interpreter. "Tell him to stay here and stand in the back like I told him." Bugallo turned to Pirulo. "What are you waiting for? He says to get out already." He obeyed and headed for the door. "Get back in here," the teacher forcefully yelled out. Sensing more than understanding, Pirulo stopped dead in his tracks. Okay, he changed his mind. Gabby went on, trying to keep the game going. "He now wants you to get back to your seat." Momentarily relieved, Mr. Merce's eyes bulged out again when he saw the nervous Pirulo about to sit. Overly tired and frustrated, he barked out in a rasping voice that left him coarse, "I said stand in the back, not sit down." "Uh-oh, now you pissed him off," exclaimed Gabby. Meanwhile, the uncertain Pirulo was shaking like a popular comedian Don Knotts. "He now wants you to take your pants down," Gabby added with a straight face. "Ay, no joda. ¿De veras? No shit, for real?" The troubled Pirulo uttered back, unbuckling his belt, suspecting that it wasn't exactly what the teacher had said, but not altogether sure. The blood on the disbelieving teacher's face seemed about to burst at the tip of his ears. What are you doing? Stop that!" Emphatically, Gabby translated. "You heard him. Drop him." Poor Mr. Merce. He taught us well and got so much grief in return. He was a kind soul who understood that you're only young once and need to have some fun. Very, very important. After that year, he taught shop class at Miami High School and later joined Eastern Airlines Company. The following year, his younger brother, Joe, was with us in the unsegregated 8th grade class. He then confided how his brother used to privately laugh at the imaginative antics of his all-Cuban class. So that play of opposites, huh? Oh, that's okay. I skipped something. Okay, I have to review this. Page 5. Okay, so that play of opposites, of extreme sadness and extreme happiness in the camps inspired me to write the first paragraph of the first chapter, and it's short. It says, "I can hardly say which way the pendulum of life was moving for us back then. It's so inopportune to live a childhood in difficult times. I guess that it was swinging both ways with the unnerving clarity of a Charles Dickens ambivalent introduction, and we didn't know about it. It was the best of times. it was the worst of times. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. It was a tale of two countries and thousands of Cuban American kids who call these years the most influential chunk of their lives. It was a story of loss and gain at a time when everything was simpler and life just as complicated. Let me now end my presentation by doing a reading of my first day in the refugee camps after that first night when I woke up. And then we'll open up for some questions to the panel. So let's see, 49. Vague voices were by the way, the chapter is called Down in Camp Florida City. This is a parallel that I try to do some literary references. And of course, there's a parallel between the storybook Pedro Pan and my book. So in the James Barrie book, this was called Down in Neverland. So it's down in Camp Florida City, which was one of the camps. Vague voices were bordering my consciousness, like a distant clamor of drums getting closer. Oh, this is an imagery of a rebirth, because most of us feel that we've lived two different lives with the separation between them. One in Cuba and one here in the United States. So this is following that imagery of being reborn. Vague voices were bordering my consciousness, like a distant clamor of drums getting closer. I then felt like I was falling through space. Suddenly, in a gasp of air, I woke up all startled to a bizarre and chaotic world spinning around me. My heart thumped. I drew a quick breath, big breath, and then another. My head felt mushy, like all my cognitive waves just couldn't get any traction towards a clear, coherent thought. About a half dozen boys with agitated voices were huddling over the pull-out sofa bed where I laid. They were crowding my space, staring at me in the face. For a shy boy like me, I found all that attention a bit overwhelming. I sank deeper into the mattress with a dry, painful lump in my throat that made it hard to swallow. My separation had occurred. Bewildered, my timid eyes were now gazing back at the first of thousands who would forever be my brothers and sisters. We have been conceived in a myriad towns and large cities in that not-so-distant island. Who cares if we look different? Who cares if we had different skin tones, different social strata, and levels of education? All that mattered was that we had the same Cuban blood running through our veins, even though we all had brought our own special sensibilities. It did not matter either what trade or profession our parents had, or what properties they held, or how rich or how poor they were. This new birthing was an equalizer, a wiping of the slate clean, tabula rasa, a new beginning. In the camps, you had to stand in with those here with you. And in that process, you couldn't help but rise to a new level of consciousness in belonging. Love you all, my Pedro Pan brothers and sisters forever. Now, guys, ready? No? Okay. Let's see.
It's life.
Let's start with you, Bugallo.
First of all,
One question.
go ahead.
You and your sister Lena are two-timers in the refugee camps. Now, I just meaning that you were in Camp Kendall first, and then you went on individual foster care for a while, and then you returned to Camp Florida City, and later Camp Opalaca, becoming a seasoned veteran of the refugee camps along with the rest of us. Tell us about that experience.
First of all, I'll take the fifth. And whatever you say, I didn't do it. Now,
The evidence betrays you.
what Javi says is very true. First of all, I just want to say, we are a band of brothers. That's what we are. Regardless our little squabbles that we had in school, this and that, to this day, we will be together for each other. And that's true. As far as the school, it was the biggest time of my life. I enjoyed it. I met a lot of people, made a lot of friends. Some I don't remember, some remember me, but we got along pretty good. When I first came, I came in 1960. I went to Matecumbe. I was too young, and then they shipped me to Kendall. Then they shipped me to Florida City. Then I left, and then I came back, and then I ended up back in Opalaca. And Mickey and I did the trip together. We met at the
Jesuit.
Together. Side by side, we made the journey to Opalaca, and then here we are, at least 60 years later. We're still close, but that's it. You know, that was the best times of my life. I really were.
Good.
Don't regret any bit of it.
Thank you. Now, Master Sims. Like the novel.
Oh yeah.
Oh, my God.
He did it.
And I remember when I first met him, I relate that in the book, that I had never volunteered for anything in my life. And the house parents said, there's a new kid that's in the office. He's coming over here to live with us. Which one of you guys wants to go there and greet him and bring him over here? Help him with the luggage. I said, I'll do it. And when I went there, and I met him, and we have been like best friends, like along with these two other guys.
He
ever since.
volunteered, and he's been stuck with me.
Now he's paying the price.
Well, okay, my question. We know that in this life, we have learned that that it's never just one thing that we're up against, and that we have to juggle several things at once. Not only were you a Cuban refugee child, like the rest of us in the camps, but you also were the eldest of 4 siblings and sort of in charge of them. And you were and are also black during the civil rights struggle here in the United States. Tell us about that experience.
I don't think I thought much about that back then. It was a matter of putting one foot in front of the other and doing what needed to be done at the time. But I remember when we first got here, some of the people that came on the plane, they were dropped off at the Tamiami Hotel off Flagler, downtown on 2nd. But then we were dropped off someplace in Overtown on top of, there was a bar downstairs and it was noisy as heck. But, you know, I didn't know what or why. I remember having one time leaving Opalaca and going to what was then Mylander Park. I don't know if it's still there. And we were going to go to the pool, and the bus stopped, and the bus driver went out, and then the bus driver came back, and the bus kept on going, and we were not able to go in the pool. Oddly enough, the first pool I went to here was in Coral Gables. Couldn't go to the pool in Hialeah, but could go to the pool in Hialeah. But that being said, you know, yes, my youngest brother was 2, my sister was 4, my brother Marcos was 8, and I was 12 going on 13. And so Marcos and I were in Florida City. My sister was first in a foster home, then she went to Florida City. My youngest brother was always in a foster home. So from Opalaca, they would take us down to Florida City on Fridays, those who had relatives to go and visit, hang out, that kind of stuff. Jumping 3 years later, my mother got here. We got an apartment in, we got an apartment, well, basically the black section of town was east of 7th Avenue. We got an apartment 2 blocks west of 7th Avenue, which was a mixed neighborhood. My mother didn't know the language. She went and took sewing classes at Lindsay Hopkins, and then she worked in a factory. And I was basically her right hand because she didn't know the language, she didn't know stuff. So in that sense, you know, well, basically, I echo what Humberto said. Those 3 years in Opalaca were a great time. But we lost, well, having said that, once we left camp, then it was really a time for growing up real quick. There was no time for bullshit. There was no time for you know, goofing around. It was time to, as I said earlier, putting one foot in front of the other and doing what needed to be done.
Let me do a follow-up question to that one. In grown-up years, you graduated from the University of Miami and continued on to law school, and then became a successful assistant United States attorney of the Southern District of Florida. And you were also the first president of our charitable organization, Operation Pedro Pan Group, Inc. Now, seeing your success, how do you attribute that to the private education we received in the camps? Yeah.
I have to give a lot of credit to the Jesuits, because they were not a narrow-minded bunch. We were exposed to different points of views, and people were able to argue different things. It was not simply, this is the way it is because we say so, but you know, we were taught to think, analyze, and I mean, we read Communist Manifesto. We read stuff about the Quran. It's not like we only do A because you live in the world and you need to know who else is out there and what other people are thinking. And that helped me, it helped me in my law career, where you have to be able to see both sides of an issue. And if you don't know what the other side is thinking or preparing for, you cannot prepare your case. So I certainly give a lot of credit to the Jesuit education.
Great. Shout out for you guys, huh? Now, Gabi, I left you for last because I knew that once you get the microphone,
Humberto's going to answer for me. Humberto's going to answer for me.
Oh, okay.
Oh, God, no.
All right, Gabby. Your dad and Bugallo's dad are double heroes for us, in the sense that they were both Pedro Pan parents, but they were also political prisoners for many, many years, the plantados that we have heard of, okay, the diehards. In the case of you, Gabi, you didn't see your dad for 17 years. Tell us about your experience when at the end of 1964, and I talk about that part in the book, but I've never asked you directly what you felt. I know your emotions were bubbling out, and I was like a friend, like a brother. I was just there for you. But now I take the time to ask you how you felt at the end of 1964 when we were in Camp Opalaca. You were separated from your younger brother Andy, who was remaining in Florida City. And then you had just found out that your dad was in jail at the infamous La Cabaña prison in the Galeras 7 and 8, which were the galeras where they would bring out every night 10 to 12 of the prisoners to be executed in the firing squads. Okay. And tell me now about your experience at that time period when you found that out.
My dad had been detained and interrogated and even beaten since 1959. When in 64, finally, they could find enough cause to try him, actually to convict him, even though the tribunal told him he had done an exemplary defense of himself because his previous lawyers have been imprisoned themselves for being disrespectful to the tribunal. Someone in the tribunal knew my dad from before and told him, you have done a brilliant defense, but nonetheless we know you're guilty, so you're condemned to 30 years. Before that, he was condemned to execution by firing squad. They stood him up with one of his friends, one of the men from his cause, which what they did was they were the ones who first gave notice to the CIA of the missiles, the Russian missiles in Cuba, especially in the area of Mariel, Cabañas. That's where we had sugarcane colonies that the rockets were right behind where I lived. So the story goes that the U-2s that flew over Cuba discovered that. It wasn't that at all. It was basically the underground, the actual Cubans who really risked their lives. And my father did everything always for God and country, never for a penny, not even to buy a gun. He furnished his own armament. He did that since the Second World War. He was part of every revolution that Cuba ever had, but Castro's revolution, which Castro asked him, how come you never joined me? And my father called him a fascineroso, which means a low class, whatever the guy actually was. So finally, someone interceded for him, which was Nicolás Guillén, one of the biggest communists that our country knew, but a very loyal and truthful friend to my dad, who told Castro, if you execute Orozco, se te vira la tortilla. This is going to really go bad for you. So he never actually executed my dad, which I was very thankful for, but they did execute the man standing next to him. They put him back into the galera with the big cell that the Spaniards made for 64 inmates, and Castro had 324. And it had a window to the firing squad. So for months, he heard the executions every morning around 6 in the morning. From there, he went to Las Granjas, they called, which is the internment camps outside of the city. They did 2 attempts on his life, once during a hurricane. Somehow he survived everything, even passing him through a bayonet in his arm, and nothing was permanently damaged, which is, I think, is a miracle. Before he was actually condemned to the 30 years, I thought I would never see him again because he was going to be executed or murdered. So once I knew where he was permanently, and believe it or not, I thought of my dad always as a hero, but I thought that now, at least we know where he's at, he won't be disappear, which is happening today in Cuba. After this outpour of, condemning of the regime. And when he kept on writing to me and telling me his situation, whatever things were going to him, always in some type of code, I started getting more and more dedicated to trying to do something similar to what he had done, but it's very difficult to do anything like that from a country like this one, especially, which they have a set of laws that that prevent you from sporting war from American territory, which I think is right. I think is wrong in the sense that it doesn't give those who look for freedom the opportunity to actually fight for that freedom. So it's another one of those things that it has some good into it and a lot of bad also. But that 17 years that I didn't see my dad, he was always in my mind as a hero. He had been in prison with Humberto's father since they were very young, in their 20s, during Machado. And then there were, at the beginning of the revolution, they were imprisoned in El Príncipe before his father was set free and my father went back to La Cabaña. And they did that to them because they had been part of the ABC organization since 1930. And they only knew each other by names. There were cells where there would be 6, maybe 10 to a cell. In case someone was apprehended, they couldn't give up the whole organization. And only that cell would suffer, which is what my father always did throughout until the Castro regime. That's how they get into everything. That's the first time they actually captured my dad and his dad, for that matter. So you can have an idea that, yes, I myself was detained the 2 first weeks of June 1961. My father was at Villa Marita under G2. I was at 13% in Víbora, being interrogated to talk about my father, which they didn't get a word out of me. They busted my face, but they didn't get anything out of me. When my mother and my aunt came, my aunt came from Pinar del Rio to get me, from Mariel, and they hurried me to hide in the countryside so my father wouldn't see me when he was released, because then he would have done something nuts. And the danger was imminent. So I always thought of heroism. I don't think I did miss my parents when I first got to Florida City, but I knew I had a mission. I knew that we had come here, many of us, knowingly that a lot of, like Gerardo and maybe Humberto or even Javi, they didn't know where they were going. I knew exactly what was going on. My father was getting the visa waivers through Panama, and I would deliver them. I would get them from the Panamanian embassy with my dad, and I would deliver them to Hermanos de la Salle. I went to Academia de la Salle. My family mostly went to La Salle in Havana. My father went to the Jesuits in Zaguala Grande, and my uncles. But I was part of that movement from day on, from day one, and I must also point out that his dad was always, como decía, my father would say, en las patas de los caballos. His father was in and out of embassies to stay alive and ahead of the milicianos and the G2, because his father was a true freedom fighter and a labor organizer like my dad. And everyone here has, or certainly there too, has heroes in their families. For longer periods of time, for maybe centuries, like my family, or recently as they develop in a new world, supposedly with liberty for everyone. So yes, it was hard and difficult, but I was very proud of being who I was. Nelson Lopez, another one of our friends, dad was always in prison with my dad, and he was allowed to leave the country in 1965. My father wasn't. When he was finally given liberty in 75, conditional liberty, they told him that he didn't exist, so he couldn't leave the country until they found out who he was. And he told them, really, you know who I am for many, many, many years now. And he wrote a poem, which put him back in prison another 4 years for one poem. So, try to talk to the guys in the Herald and tell them they're going to go to, forced labor because they write a poem where only one line, according to them, insulted the revolution. He called them a pack of dogs. That gave him 4 years in prison. They wanted 3 years, but because he defended himself, they gave him 4. So again, tell all this freedom or all these rights screamers, the rights, you have to earn them. And in many places, they don't exist. And it's not only in Cuba, it's a lot of other places here. We have it very, very good. In certain countries in Europe, perhaps, but very few other countries allow people to actually speak their minds with no reprisals. So I leave it at that, because you asked about my dad. I could go on and on and on.
Now I'll sit with them, and then we'll take questions from the audience. Oh, please go to the microphones on the side so that everyone can hear your questions, please. And then to whom do you want? Oh, we can field the questions here, okay? And you grab most of them.
Anyone wants to ask a question? Miguel, okay. Miguel, go on. Oh God, I can't see.
By the way, Miguel de la Torre's father was also with my father in Combinado del Este prison. Many years. Came in the same flight of Cuban prisoners in 1978.
Wow, we have a chai group.
Very silent room.
Aquí.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay,
Gaby,
Gaby.
but come over here because otherwise
that my father had.
they won't hear you. If you have a question, go to the microphone. Okay.
With me, I'm beaten.
Oh, I have a question.
People.
Yep.
Javier,
Okay.
primero que nada, I want to congratulate you for this amazing job. Writing a book and writing a memoir, something that is so personal.
Thank you.
It must be most of the most difficult things to do. And for me, it's very interesting to know from you, I've never asked you this, and we've talked so many times. Memories, sometimes, because I experienced that with my own story of separation, I feel that sometimes they might not be objective. That might be my memory of an event might be completely different from the memory of the same event by other people that share it. And I can ask you many things now that and I will in the future, but this is something I would like to ask you now. How do you feel that your memory resonates with the memory of not only your brothers of Pedro Pan, but with your own family, with your brother, with people that lived what you lived? Did you feel sometime I guess what I want to know is if you feel sometime when you wrote it that you could be saying something that could be contested, that could be offensive to someone that lived the same process. I don't know. I'm talking about the memoir as a.
I understand. Yes, it was very difficult in that sense. Like I said before, it was like, first of all, I had to start with what I remember as a child, as an 11-year-old, and then as an early adolescent in the camps. And then, my analysis now as an adult about those same experiences. And then I went and I would share those anecdotes and all those experiences with them, from my Pedro Pan brothers and sisters, and then I would get feedback from them to see. So when I do a characterization of a person, some of the names are changed to protect their privacy. The guilty, such me. Yes, they are aliases, but most of them are real, and I wanted that to be real. As a matter of fact, when I started, everything had different names, okay, and then you used the word resonate. It just didn't sound well to me. That's not how the story goes. I wanted to be the way it was ism type of story, not a revisionist historian type of story. And whenever the story was a little sketchy or I was telling them, I would run it by them and to see what they thought. And then of course they would have their own version, and sometimes they corrected me, and that's why it took so many years.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mine is a really quick question. Again, I also want to congratulate you because it is a wonderful, wonderful book, writing yours and so many other stories. Did you ever reunite with your brother?
Did what?
Yeah, once they separated you guys when you got here.
Yes.
Were you reunited?
Yes, it was in Camp Opalaca because I was. Camp Florida City was for girls of all ages, okay, up to 18 years of age. Of course, after that you were on your own. But for the preteen boys, so since I was 11, at that time I lived in Camp Florida City for 1 year. So I was 12 going on 13 that fall semester. So that meant I was going to be a teenager. So they couldn't have that. So they put me with the older kids, and we all went in the same bus together. So these are friendships that we had established in Camp Florida City. After that, they were not moving us out of there. So we were able to get to know one another by name, nickname, and really bond as brothers. Yeah. So yes, I got to know him to be my brother back then. But he came and visited me on the weekends, on Fridays.
And another question, that a family member of ours also was a Pedro Pan, and he went another route through Spain. And I want to know, because he's now, as an older man, he has a lot of, I don't know if it's,
angst.
Yeah, he has he's glad his parents did it, but also he missed out on being with his parents. He grew up with us, which is we're his cousins, and my parents are his aunt and uncle and godparents. But yet he feels, and he adores my parents, so it was a good relationship. But he feels like he can't get over the fact that he was sent away on his own.
Yeah, that's a similar experience, but let me correct you on that, that he's not a Pedro Pan. He's one of the kids from Spain. And
Yes.
That's a different exodus that we even
Right,
had
right.
an exhibit, I mean, a talk here about a panel discussions about their experience, okay? That's a different program that went through Spain, and it was years later, and different age levels and all of that, and I also include that in the book because I wanted to be comprehensive about all those children exodus. But yes, we have that in common, and you can't have everything, okay? You cannot have freedom and then be at home, with your parents. It's parents have to make that decision.
A very hard
It's
one.
the right decision to make, okay? So like I said, when there's a crisis, you have to take desperate measures sometimes, okay? So, and that's the fate, esto es lo que te toca a uno,
Exacto.
a uno, tú sabes.
Thank
So
you.
you do
And
it.
again, thank you for
Yeah,
writing the
thanks,
book. Thank you.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
¿Saben quién soy, por supuesto?
Who let you in?
Who let me in? I don't know. I snuck in. I'm glad you, first of all, congratulations for writing the book, and I love that you wrote the book from the perspective of the kids that stayed in the camp. I've read several books about Pedro Pans, and a lot of them were written by people that were sent out to foster homes and other places, and their perspective or the way the experience that they had was not the same as ours that stayed in the camps.
Exactly.
We forged tremendous friendships that, although we don't see each other, at least I don't on a regular basis, but to me, again, like you said, we're brothers because we lived through that experience. So I'm glad that you wrote the book from the perspective of the people in Pedro Pan, and I'm glad that you said that you had a great experience, because I did. I love the fact that I was there. I love the fact that I enjoyed and made so many great people. And I tell my wife all the time that I don't know of one Pedro Pan that was in camp that became a criminal or everybody that was there that I know of made something of themselves. So I'm glad that you said that. I enjoyed the fact that you said that you enjoyed the time there just like I did. So congratulations, thank you, and we'll see each other later on today.
Thank you so much.
Eduardo Juan Rodriguez.
Oh, my God.
I'm kind of an outsider, but I grew up with all of you,
Yes, you
and
did.
for which I am thankful
I
because
forgive you, my child.
I love you too, but
I did very little growing after 13.
Yeah, I was.
But wait, you were in sort of adopted Pedro Pan and Sweet Dreams for a little
Yeah.
bit too with Father Ripoll. So
He was a two-month
Yeah.
Pedro Pan.
but I mean, we grew up together. We like you already very graciously have explained all the tribulations you went to, the horrors you suffered, the fun that you had. But the question now becomes, if you had to give a statement going forward from what you've experienced, what would you tell everybody out there, not just from the book, but from the heart of what lesson can we take away from your experiences? And I direct it to all four of you because I mean, I know you so well, and I know that you do have a lot of feelings for this country as you do for Cuba. So, but what would be your expression of what have we learned as people, as a country, going forward.
Wow.
I'll start the first, and then you guys can make a comment also, individual. At the end of the book, I deal with that question. I say that that there comes a times when you have to stand in for your principles, and that's the main thing. You know, you have to stand up for what you truly believe in, because if you don't do that, you know, it will ruin your spirit, and that you must fight at all cost. So as briefly as that. Yeah. Yes.
Don't surrender. Keep moving forward. Stick together, and we will all prevail.
Exactly.
You know, you're an honorary member of the Pedro Pan anyway.
There's other guys here from our little group, like, Eduardo Juan Rodriguez, who just spoke from there, and Juan Antonio Maurín Gómez, oriundo de Ciego de Ávila.
Ciego de Ávila.
Him and I were like tight like glue, and we were fishing maniacs, responsible for throwing crabs the night that they played Tarantula in Florida City, and all the women were flying off the second story.
Not guilty, not guilty.
I wasn't there.
And by the way, I'm sorry for my brother always stepping on your back toe.
Manolo was an amazing individual.
Gabi.
Okay. So,
Remember?
yeah, we have, you know, I forgot to acknowledge that we've lost so many Pedro Pan brothers and sisters, and we truly love them, and we miss them all. We miss them, every single one of them.
And we have Rene Walker there, who was part of the group, but he was too lazy to get in trouble.
No, he was cautious. He was smart.
Slippery, I'll call it.
So, some of that from the girls in Florida City. No, any questions?
Maybe a few complaints.
Yeah. That's your stuff.
That's yours.
That's your stuff, alligator.
Okay. Now this was a joke of one of the chapters called "Brothers of the Spear." You know, if you get the book.
Say, you know, that through the years, I once in a while I don't see you for a period of time, like Gerardo and Humberto, Javier, and especially Gabi for a long time. But something was said that is really holds true to me. Once you establish a brotherhood like we did, we're brothers for life. And I'm extremely proud to have been, you know, a member of this group of young boys who came in here and did what the American dream is really about.
Exactly.
I'm extremely proud of each and every one of you, and each and every one of my Pedro Pan brothers and sisters who have done so well for this community. And I am extremely proud of the work that you guys have done, because I know for a fact that you have done more than just being Pedro Pan organization. I know what you have done for other children that came after us that needed help, and I know you have done that. So from my heart to you, thank you, and I'm proud of you.
No.
Love you always.
Well, thank you for your brotherhood.
One question.
Microphone, please.
Espérate. No, it's a quick question. It's a personal question. There was a gentleman who brought you a live alligator to Pedro Camp in Florida City. Do you remember who he was?
No, in Florida City.
In Florida City, they brought an alligator.
Yeah, it was my brother Pepe.
Your brother. Yeah. Well, I know that he brought in all kinds of snakes from Camp
Yeah.
Matecumbe, But I guess that there were alligators in that little lake that we had there where we played.
No, there
ball.
weren't any.
No,
There were in
no.
the little canal on
Yeah.
37th Avenue.
No,
He was with Ralito del Campo, fishing by the canals close to our Florida Paradise now, and they got an alligator. They hit the alligator. They thought it was dead. And they put it in the trunk and took it to the camp. When they dropped it in the floor in the camp, the alligator was alive.
You know, we had the little alligator that we had in Opalaca. It was Gary and I used to get in the shower and block all the four corners of the showers, and put the alligator in there, and everybody else was standing in the shower waiting until the alligator left. Okay, and just Gary and I will be taking a shower, and the alligator will be swimming along, just carrying along, and grab that little alligator and go out with it, and everybody go piled in the showers. But we had a lot of good times.
He was lousy alligator bait.
I know.
We tied him, threw him in the canal. When the alligator was getting close to him, this guy says, "Wow, luce cenizo." He was full of gray mud. So we start laughing and we let him go again.
That is one of the stories that people misremember.
No, me being in a fist fight with an alligator. That's too bad. It's crazy.
But when we caught that alligator, the only three guys that went in the canal to get it was the three of us. The other people claim that they were the ones who shot him with a bow and arrow, but it took us to go in the water and get it.
We didn't want the alligator. We just wanted the arrow. That's the whole thing.
The arrow back.
He won't give it up, so we brought him with us.
Questions?
Oh
my
God.
gosh.
The best pizza ever.
Anyway, for
Yeah,
a
that's-
buck and a quarter, got a big pizza.
Actually,
Yes,
this is not a question, but I want to take the opportunity to thank you in front of everybody
Thanks.
that you have taken the time to write the book about your experience that is our experience. I want to ask everybody here that if you have not gotten the book yet, please buy the book and read it. I had the pleasure to do it some little while ago, and this is, I couldn't control myself, and I wanted to come over and thank you in front of everybody. This is very important that we keep proclaiming our real story, because the ones that destroy our island, our country of birth, they say that this was not necessary, that our parents didn't have to take their steps to try to save us. That's what they claim. And unfortunately, you see how they have destroyed our beautiful Cuba. So this is very important that we keep this alive. And as a representative of the Operation Pedro Pan group, I encourage everybody that is not familiar with our group, try to find out what we are, what we do. And again, thank you very much, and God bless you, all you guys. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
In reference to that topic, let me say also that even though we went through that separation experience, I think that even it made our families even closer. That seems contradictory, but that's the way it resulted. It's because, for myself, when I reunited with my parents, I said I will never, even though I was going through adolescence, and how adolescents are supposed to rebel with their parents. I said I would never waste a single day of my life being against my parents. I would love them every day. And I think it made for a much closer family, and they were more tolerant towards me, and of course I was more tolerant towards them. And I like to say in the exhibits that when we met again, I was 16 going on 29, because that's how you had to grow up. When you're alone, you grow up fast. But the separation made us even stronger families, okay? Cuban families. Don't you agree?
Yes.
To what? El Pirulo, El Pirulo. El Pirulo, unfortunately, we haven't been in touch with him again.
I wonder why.
Yeah, there's always, like in the classes, there's always one or two that are more gullible than the rest, and but at that time we had our differences, and we made fun of them, nicknames and stuff like that. But it was always with that brotherly type of
Bullying.
of fun.
Like
Bullying. Now, I don't believe in snowflakes, okay? So you have to toughen it out, okay? Life is hard, so, don't, you can't be that. Yeah. Is that it?
I have one question.
Oh.
Mickey mentioned the education with the Jesuits. I mean, all four of you, chose Belen, and we grew up together in Belen. What prompted the choice of Belen as opposed to La Salle when you guys made that decision?
At the risk of sticking my foot in my mouth.
Okay, we'll take it out.
I'd like to see that.
I went to Pace. I went to Monsignor Edward Pace High School because it was close to Opalaca.
So did I.
Then my mother got here in March, and Ripoll got me into Belen. Originally, I didn't go to Belen because Belen is an all-boys school. Pace was closer, and it was not all boys.
I don't remember.
So there you have it.
I don't remember any guys from Pace. I do remember all the girls. That was it.
But
you remember
never.
any important name in
No.
Pace High?
I had to take two buses.
Like Nancy
To get-
Smith?
Yeah, Nancy. I had to take
Guys,
two buses, one to downtown,
You're going the
and
wrong
then
way.
the 5 bus.
Don't
to
get
to
into
Belen.
that topic now.
Gabby?
Rain, cold, but I mean, I don't regret it. But Belen was a much longer haul from Opalaca than was Pace.
Of course.
So that was that. And I will say, I showed up at Belen in March of the school year, and I was completely accepted by those 9th grade students.
No, we didn't have any problems. You were one of us. Always been. Always will be.
So that's that.
Conclusion?
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for writing the book.
Elvis has left the building.
And I gave my Halloween story, but I didn't do it.
Yes. You have another place better? Here's good. Here's good.
Here, what do we do? That's for you.
For me?
Yeah. That's for you.
If anybody has books to sign, we're going to make a line here, and then he's going to sign them from there.
I'm gonna go down this way. I'm not signing this.
You're not? That's